Thank you very much, Callum. And that takes us very timely on to the topical resolutions. Topical Resolution 4, Investing in Scotland's Young People, is to be moved by Angela Constance, MSP, to be seconded by Kevin Stewart, MSP. Angela is, of course, the Minister for Youth Employment.
Conference. When I was a teenager growing up in West Lothian during the 1980s, 1 in 4 men were unemployed, and my father was one of those men. So for me, tackling unemployment is more than political, it's personal, and all the more so for every young Scot seeking work today. Because we need to claim our young people, they're ours, and they're not lost, and as parents, grandparents, aunts and uncles, these are quite literally our kids. And make no mistake about it, unemployment can happen to any young person, as we know that it's young people that are hit the hardest when the economy is weak. And we are facing a national challenge that requires a national response, and boosting youth employment is at the absolute heart of everything this government does, and I can assure you, Conference, that for every Scottish Government Minister, the needs of our young people is imprinted upon them. And we must and we will marshal every effort across the public, private and third sector to ensure an all-government, all-Scotland response to youth unemployment. And at the forefront of our offer to young people is Opportunities for All, an unprecedented commitment of a place of learning or training to every 16 to 19-year-old who needs one. And Opportunities for All has been backed up by £30 million, and initial announcements include continuation of Community Jobs Scotland, a challenge fund for social enterprise, and bespoke employment support for some of our most disadvantaged young people. So on a day-to-day basis, government ministers will work hand in glove with business and civil leaders the length and breadth of Scotland to maximise opportunities from procurement to engage with industry sector by sector, address skills shortages in rural Scotland and key growth industries, regenerate urban Scotland, and to focus on young people both furthest and nearest to the labour market. And we will make the most of once-in-a-generation opportunities such as the Commonwealth Games, and the First Minister announced yesterday a £5 million package to improve the employment prospects of young people in sports and legacy-related industries. And all of this is in addition to the year-on-year investment of £1.5 billion in education and training, 25,000 modern apprenticeships for every year of this Parliament, the retention of the educational maintenance allowance and free education, and post-16 education reform to improve the connectivity between the world of education and the world of work. So, Conference, rest assured that this government will squeeze out every last job and opportunity for young people within our existing powers. And I believe we've done a good job under the limits of devolution, but just think about what we can aspire to and achieve under independence. Now, the UK government has got itself into hot water with its work experience scheme, and for the sake of young Scots, I'm glad that they've rolled back from their benefit sanctions, ensuring that it is indeed entirely voluntary for young Scots to join or leave a work experience scheme. But this government is absolutely clear: work experience should not be provided at the expense of giving our young people a job. High quality, meaningful work experience is one thing, but there is no place for exploitation in modern Scotland. Conference, with responsibility of welfare benefits and the tax system, amongst other things, we could do so much more to deploy direct methods and incentives to get young people back into work. And I believe with all my heart in the right to work. And the referendum will, of course, be Scotland's chance to ensure that we never go back to the 1980s and that those days are indeed consigned to history. And our young people, including our 16 and 17-year-olds, should have the right to vote for a parliament that can actually deliver them the right to work. Conference, I thank you very much and I hope you can support the motion.
Thank you. And Kevin Stewart, MSP, will be the second and final speaker.
Thank you, Convener. And Conference, you should realise how much the SNP government thinks about this and the fact that Angela is the only youth employment minister in these Isles. And yet, our opponents in Parliament are constantly critical about what this government is doing. And at the same time, it was the Labour Party who are doing this carping, who voted against 25,000 modern apprenticeships in the last budget. That, Conference, is absolutely disgraceful. One of the things that frustrates me is being an MSP, and I enjoy being an MSP, is the fact that sometimes we can only get half a job done. Why? Because we don't have all of the powers. And sometimes, as an MSP, there's a lot of irony from the opposite benches. Labour Party last November published their 5-point plan for jobs in Scotland and said that the government was not reacting enough to deal with the employment situation. Of those 5 points, 4 of those points are Westminster retained powers. The only point that the Scottish Government could deal with was increase capital spending, which this government has rightly done in this time of economic woe. They do not understand the fact that we should be able to deal with the other 4 points too, to make sure that we keep Scotland and Scottish people in jobs. How daft are these people when they write something like that and then don't seem to understand that there's very little that we can do about it because their Tory mates down the road still have all of the powers? I would like Angela to have all of the powers that she needs at her disposal to ensure that young people stay and work in Scotland. I would like Angela to have the power over Job Centre Plus. I would like our ministers to control all aspects of the DWP. And I would like our ministers to have powers over all tax and benefits so that we can do what is right for this nation and not for what's right south of the border. We have to be extremely wary of some of the things that are coming out at this moment in time. Angela has talked about work experience. People should not be forced to do something that they don't want to do. Volunteering is fine, but the Tories would, I think, force folk back up chimneys, never mind anything else. Beyond that, Margaret Burgess earlier pointed out the difficulties with welfare reform. I have the pleasure of serving on that committee with Margaret and can listen to her expertise there. We need those powers. We need to do what's right for this country. And I would urge you to support this motion, but not only this one, the next one too. Because not only do we want to see our young people in work, we also want to give them the power and franchise them. Votes for 16 and 17-year-olds too, please. Thank you.
There are no cards in against, and Angela, would you waive your right to sum up? Thank you very much. Conference, can I request that the resolution is passed by acclaim? Thank you. And Resolution 5, votes at 16, will be moved by Gail Lithgow to be seconded by David Linden. And Gail, of course, is of the Federation of Student Nationalists.
Conference, it's a great pleasure to be speaking on such an important issue today. We had a fringe dedicated to this over lunch, and Kevin Stewart was indeed chairing it. It went very well with some positive action points to take from it, and many thanks to Robin Parker of NUS Scotland and Grant Costello of the Scottish Youth Parliament for taking part. Well, delegates, our party is 78 this year, and our movement is on a journey. It's 78 years of history for this moment. 78 years of pounding the streets, 78 years of those wet, rainy days trying to shove crumpled leaflets through letterbox after letterbox. After 78 years, this is the one. There is only one outcome that we desire, no silver or bronze medal. There is only one podium for us, and we owe it to those generations who have come before us, the ones who laid the groundwork to put every ounce of energy into this cause. However, delegates, perhaps even more importantly, we owe it to Scotland's future generations, for it is they that have most at stake the outcome of this referendum. And Conference, it is only right and proper that those who do have the most at stake in the future of our nation be given the right to have a say. How can it be that young people at the age of 16 can pay taxes, join the army cadets, and consent to marriage, but not elect those who decide how much we'll pay and where our taxes will go? For us, as a party, I am extremely humbled to be able to say it has always been a point of principle to extend the vote out to as wide a section of society as possible. And delegates, today I move this motion in the name of SNP students, and it will be seconded by the Young Scots for Independence. But it is not an issue that is dear to only our hearts. It is dear to the hearts and minds of many of you in this room, and to many that have gone before us. Indeed, Conference, you passed the resolution in 1985, and I wasn't around then, stating simply, Conference believes the electoral voting age should be reduced to 16. Our long support for this important democratic right cannot get much clearer than that. And both Angus Robertson and Winnie Ewing have used their maiden speeches in the House of Commons, that house which still retains a say over Scotland's franchise, to call for the lowering of a voting age. In Winnie's time, it was from 21 to 18, but even she at that time wondered if earlier would be better. But Conference, what of our opponents? We're not far away from the 2012 Olympics, as you know, and I'll tell you, with their flipping and flopping, their dodging and diving, if there was a gold medal for political acrobatics, our opponents would win every time. The Labour Party and the Lib Dems voted for votes at 16 for the recent AV referendum, as well as many of their MSPs who've signed up to the votes at 16 pledge. But how quickly they turn, watch them squirm, watch them wriggle as they try to explain that they apparently support votes at 16, just not for this referendum. Delegates, it's the Groucho Marx School of Politics. These are my principles, but if you don't like them, I have others, and their position... Their position is quite simply indefensible. Conference, we are now at the cusp of something momentous and at the edge of something historic. The most important decision our nation has made for 300 years is upon us. It is our referendum, our Scotland and our future, but Conference, it is as much, if not more, 16 and 17-year-olds' future, and therefore it must be their referendum. Our young people must have a part in this debate and its outcome. They carry with them the confidence unparalleled of generations gone past. It is my belief that for us young Scots, devolution is normal. We've never really known anything but a Scottish Parliament displaying competence with the powers we already have. For us, Scotland has always been on a journey. We have not been worn down with negative scaremongering of our opponents. Young Scots have not had to endure decades of opponents' rhetoric telling them they're too small or too weak. It is clear that the anti-independence parties have abandoned Scotland's young people and they fear their voice and their votes. I know that we believe in the lowering of voting age, regardless of how young people vote. It is therefore up to us to carry the hopes and the ambitions of future generations of Scots upon our shoulders. We have a real opportunity to achieve votes at 16. And in conference, in this vein, I ask you to endorse this motion, sign the pledge outside, and help propel us towards Scotland's independence generation.
Thank you. And David Linden will second from the Young Scots for Independence. And on the speaker's card it says, do you have any special interest in the subject being discussed? And David's written, I'm pure dead young.
Conference delegates, I'm delighted to second this resolution on behalf of the Young Scots for Independence. I broke my conference duck when I was 17 at our annual conference in Aviemore. Due to my age at the time, some people drew comparisons to William Hague's first speech to Tory Party conference in 1977. I'm still not sure 5 years on whether that was a compliment or not, but during that conference, however, I spoke on the same topic as the one that we are debating today, votes at 16, a subject still very close to my heart. Conference, let me say from the absolute outset, we don't back votes at 16 because it's politically expedient for the SNP or somehow the cause of independence. No, Conference, we back votes at 16 because it's the right thing to do. Our support for votes at 16 goes back many years, long before it was popular, long before Labour and the Liberals thought it was fashionable. When I first started leafleting for the party in the 2001 election, we took just 18% of the vote in Glasgow Bayliston. Our support for votes at 16 was as strong then as it is now. Win, lose, whatever, we are the party of youth, and Conference, we are the party that stands up for Scotland's young people. I'd like to quote a short extract from last week's Third Force News, where the Chief Executive of Young Scot, Louise MacDonald, says, and I quote, "Meet Rory. Rory has a job at a local shop. After tax and national insurance, his paycheck may not be very much, but it's enough for him and his new wife to pay rent and council tax on their flat. Rory is passionate about local and national politics. It's therefore not much of a surprise that the upcoming referendum on Scottish independence in 2014 is of particular interest to him. Not that it matters, because Rory at 17 can't vote. Pay tax, yes. Get married, yes. Join the armed forces, yes. Have sex, absolutely. He can even change his name by deed poll to Lord Gaga if he fancies it. But to have a say in Scotland's constitutional future, no chance." Louise MacDonald makes the point perfectly well, and I don't need to go over the arguments for votes at 16. They're well known, and normally most political parties support them. Well, only some, and only when it suits them. This, delegates, is where the politics kicks in. Well, what's the Liberal Democrat position on votes at 16? Well, before they hopped into bed with the Tories, they supported it. The Labour position on votes at 16? Well, they support it, but not for the referendum. Oh no, heaven forfend the idea that Scotland's future get a say in the future of Scotland. Now, unfortunately, my local Labour MP is the Shadow Secretary of State for Scotland, or as we in the East End like to call her, London Labour's shadow in Glasgow East. But what does Margaret Curran think about votes at 16? Well, she supports votes at 16, but not for a referendum. Oh no, she, just like the rest of the Labour Party, is in bed with David Cameron, Nick Clegg and Michael Moore. Conference, it just goes to show you can't trust unionists with referenda. Delegates, our position is crystal clear. We support votes at 16, always, forever, regardless of the election. Health Board elections, yes. The Crofton Commission, yes. That's because we already have the power to do it. If we had the power, local government, yes. If we had the power, national government, yes. And when London eventually gives us the power, referenda, yes. It's all the same, and it should not be about politics. Conference is a point of principle. If you're old enough to get married, join the army and pay tax to the government, you should be old enough to have a say in the government. And just in closing, convener, we'll hear lots of ridiculous arguments from the unionists in this debate. They'll tell us Scotland is too wee, too stupid and too poor, apparently now too immature. Delegates, let us defeat all of those shoddy arguments and go forward to independence. Thank you.
Conference, there are no cards in against. Is the resolution passed by acclaim? And now to Topical Resolution 6, to be moved by John Wilson MSP and seconded by Chick Brodie MSP. And John Wilson is the Deputy Convener on the Scottish Parliament Committee for Economy, Energy and Tourism.
Thank you, Business Convener and Conference. It gives me great pleasure to be moving this topical resolution today. As the Convener has outlined, I have not only the privilege and pleasure of serving in the Scottish Parliament, but I've also had the privilege of being the Deputy Convener of the Economy, Energy and Tourism Committee. What we've seen in that committee over the last 9 months is a continuation of policy from a government that started a road in the 2007, after the 2007 election. We saw a policy in terms of climate change that drove a government to put forward the most advantageous policies in terms of energy in the world. We saw targets being set by that government that are now being carried forward. And not only targets being set, but targets that we are now working to achieve. The Scottish Government continues to lead the way in promoting the use of renewable technologies. And the electricity generation policy statement that was produced last week by the Scottish Government reaffirms the commitment and ambition to be at the forefront of energy from renewables. Using all the natural resources that Scotland has in abundance, wind, wave, tidal and other resources that are available within Scotland, we are showing the way that Scotland can actually lead the world. We actually see, and we've heard this weekend, statements from the First Minister and John Swinney that quite clearly counters the argument that was coming out from David Cameron and other Westminster politicians who were saying that companies were unsure about independence, what independence would bring for them, and they were not investing in Scotland. We've heard the list of companies that are investing in Scotland, particularly in renewable technologies. International companies moving into Scotland, bringing with them investment, technology, and also the resources to ensure that Scotland can lead the way, not only in the UK, but also throughout Europe and the world. We also see the issues that were actually in abundance that we have. We've got the wind, wave, tidal, hydro, and biomass. We actually see companies now, the Scottish and Southern Energy, promoting the issue of hydropower once again, and an energy source that will be useful for Scotland to actually bring together that mix to ensure that we do attain that target by 2020 of 100% of energy being produced by renewables. Conference, we have to welcome a decision made earlier this week by Vince Cable, because we have to recognise the UK government has taken on board the arguments from the Scottish Government and others that by investing in Scotland's renewable technologies, we are leading the way. And to that extent, Vince Cable agreed that the Green Investment Bank will be located in Edinburgh, and that brings with it £3 billion worth of possible investment in renewable technology. So it's a welcome that we must concede, but we will use those resources and that commitment to ensure that Scotland moves forward. We've also got to address, and Business Convener, I've got to take this opportunity today to raise the issue. In Scotland, we still, unfortunately, see too much fuel poverty. We have got to ensure that when we're actually developing the technologies and we're developing that 100% renewable target, that we actually produce power and electricity that is affordable and that the people of Scotland can benefit from. We have the opportunity in Scotland to actually bring renewable power to the people of Scotland and further beyond. I hope conference will support this resolution today and look forward to working towards those targets. Thank you.
And to second, Chick Brodie, MSP.
Thank you, Convener. Thank you, Conference. I'm pleased to second this motion and pleased to endorse the comment made about the £3 billion investment bank, Green Investment Bank in Edinburgh, which will facilitate private investment in our renewable economy. And I do so not just because I believe that our renewable energy plans, what they mean for our green and low carbon economy, what they certainly mean for job opportunities and for our environment, what they mean to our efforts not just to reduce, but indeed, as John said, eliminate fuel poverty, but because, as John Swinney said this morning, they provide the sound economic base for an independent Scotland, which will allow us to do all these things and so much more. The second Energy Revolution Conference is here. Some of you fellow delegates who are real dead old will remember how Scotland was first cheated out of the benefits of oil and gas revenues in the early days of and since its discovery. The 1974 Macron report to a Tory government, and slavishly then accepted by a subsequent Labour one, concluded that North Sea oil revenues would then have given an independent Scotland one of the strongest economies in Europe with large tax surpluses. And it went on to say that officials advised the London government ministers on how they, and I quote, might take the wind out of Scotland's sails. Well, Mr Macron and successive London governments, the wind both onshore and offshore is now in Scotland's sails. The message to them is this: fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. Well, this time, conference, we and the people of Scotland will not be fooled. All of the scaremongering by Cameron and co is because they realise, as their predecessors did, the consequence of losing the economic advantages of the natural energy resources that Scotland has and that they are bringing to the people of Scotland. This time we will not be fooled. This time we will not be cheated. Our income from renewable energy will go into investment for our nation's benefit and not just into consumption for the fat cats in the City of London. Our renewable route map, whether it's wind, marine, bioenergies, energy from waste, from hydro, microgeneration, and allied to a much more purposeful profiling and reducing of energy demand, will produce huge economic benefits, up to 40,000 jobs, 30 billion of investment, and so on. And say, finally, Convener, to those Jeremiahs, to the scaremongers who say we will never generate the equivalent of 100% of our electricity consumption by 2020, tell them we are already 1/3 of the way there. I'm pleased to second this motion, not just because it is a second energy revolution, but it is the foundation of securing a Scotland, not only rich in monetary terms, but rich in so many other ways, but more importantly, it leads to a strong, independent and global nation.
Thank you. And there are no cards in against. The mover has very kindly waived the right to sum up. They don't know that, but they just have. Can I ask that the resolutions pass by acclaim? Thank you. And we have got time to take the final resolution, our final topical resolution, which meant we've taken every resolution in the special conference, and it will be moved by Pete Wishart, MP. And just before he does, can I have a formal seconder from the floor? Thank you very much.
Well, thank you for that, and thank you for that, Convener. Conference, in the next few weeks, we in Perth will learn whether we will join the rest of the community of cities across Scotland and become Scotland's 7th official city. The announcement of the Queen's Diamond Jubilee competition is about to be announced, and everybody in Perth is on tenterhooks about that decision. This hasn't been your normal competition this time around. Usually there's a separate and distinct competition for all the nations of the United Kingdom. But for some reason this time around, the UK government decided that there would only be one winner from across the whole of the UK. Now, there's something like 40 towns applicants that are involved in this process. Towns as huge as Milton Keynes or Reading, like 200,000 people, and Perth has got to compete against them for this city honour. Now, we'll take on anybody in Perth. We're quite happy to do that. But, you know, it would be quite nice sometimes if the rest of the nations in the UK was sometimes recognised when it came to these things. There was 2 Scottish competitions in the last 15 years, in the 2000 and 2002, when Inverness and Stirling became official cities. And I don't think it's too much to ask that this time round, Scotland could have had its own distinct competition. And for Perth, it's much more than just about a competition. For us, it's about justice. It's about restoration. We were a city. We were the capital city of Scotland. We are the fair city of Perth, the gateway to the Highlands and the fastest growing population in Scotland. So yes, it would be nice to win this competition, but we deserve our city status back, a city status that was callously taken away from us in the 1970s with local government reorganisation. Such has been the support for Scotland's bid, because it is now the only bid from Scotland, that we've managed to secure support from across the political spectrum and across the community of Perthshire. All the political parties in the Scottish Parliament have signed up to Perth's bid. All the leaders of the political parties have signed the pledge for Perth. And such is the effect and the dramatic impact of this lobbying that the government now, the UK government, are now considering having a second or even a third winner for this competition. So I want to thank absolutely everybody who's been involved in this campaign. The First Minister who's raised it twice with the Prime Minister in the course of the past year. It's been a fantastic campaign, so let's really hope that we get this. And I want to welcome you all back with John Swinney and Rosanna Cunningham when Conference comes back to the fair city of Perth back in October, that you'll be coming back to Scotland's 7th official city. Thank you.